Hello, my name is Daniel Lambton-Howard. I'm from Open Lab at Newcastle University. And I'm here to talk on behalf of my numerous co-authors around a project we did in collaboration with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. So, we were starting with the challenge that we were set. We were working with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, or the IFRC. So this is the largest humanitarian organisation in the world. They've got 90 million volunteers worldwide. They're the kind of central governing body that's based in Geneva, that kind of looks over all the policy and is a strategy for all the Red Crosses around the world. They're currently undergoing a 3-year strategic process, which they're calling Strategy 2030, which is they're trying to chart what 2030 is going to be like and what the Red Cross and Red Crescent needs to change in order to be that. And obviously, as part of these large-scale strategic processes, they want to include a lot of voices in that, and particularly they want to include young voices, the voices of young people. They're young volunteers, which they very charitably say is under 35, so just in there, which is great. But particularly, they wanted to make the voices of these young people visible and authentic as well. So they've got 14 million young volunteers globally. So how have they tried to do this before? How have they tried to incorporate those voices in strategic thinking so far? Well, really, they've used questionnaires and surveys, and they've found, quite simply, that for their purposes, surveys don't work. They're just not getting the voices of the global youth meaningfully incorporated into their strategic thinking. And also, they reported a genuine scepticism towards participation in general with the young volunteers. So there's this idea of the black hole of feedback, that young people are often providing information, this is what we think should be the case, but then not getting anything back and not seeing where that feedback's going. Also participation fatigue as well. They're asked a lot. And no more questionnaires, no more surveys. And also there's filtering. The IFRC is a very, very hierarchical organisation with numerous branches that go up and up and up. And often by the time somebody on the volunteer on the ground has had their say, it's very different by the time it reaches the person who makes a decision at the top. So we had a lot of interviews and a lot of meetings with the IFRC and tried to work out what kind of engagement could we design. And we came up with 3 design goals for a large-scale engagement with young people. Number 1 was to actually both increase the quantity and quality of engagement by lowering participation, and also maybe using some gameful design as well. I've got a background in game design, so I was keen to do that. Also complexity. We're talking about global drivers of change here. So these are very complicated global issues. How do we sort of support these young people in understanding these complex global issues on a local scale? And also the data. They wanted rich, qualitative multimedia artifacts that were authentic. They wanted to directly get the voices of young people in front of people who make those decisions. So let's play a game on WhatsApp. We knew we wanted something gameful, and we wanted something playful, but why did we choose WhatsApp? Well, the simple answer is this map here. So this is the most popular messaging apps in every country as of the time that we did the study. As you can see, everywhere that's green is WhatsApp is the most popular one. And as you can see, that's a lot of the developing world. And what this map doesn't show as well, that everywhere where it's blue, generally WhatsApp is the second as well. It's massive. It's absolutely everywhere. It's widely used by young people already in the developing world. It's already accessible and installed on their phones. In fact, a lot of them already use it to organise themselves on the ground. So in this way, by using it, we're lowering the barrier of participation. No one needs to download anything. No one needs to download any new apps. Most of them have already got the technological capacity to take part in this engagement. And also it's authentic. If this is what they're using to speak with themselves, then surely that it's a more authentic way of then communicating with the strategy makers. And also it's novel. No one's really done a game on WhatsApp before, certainly not on the scale that we're talking about. And that's kind of cool. That's going to help people. People want to take part in that. And also it's fast and it's cheap. We turned this around in about 3 months. We didn't have to build anything. We didn't have to pay any developers. We just thought really hard about what WhatsApp is and how we could creatively use it. But of course there are some drawbacks with using WhatsApp. Less control. If WhatsApp suddenly decide, yeah, we're going to turn the feature off that lets you get your data out, that's the whole study gone. Also, it's not designed for research as well. If you export... Sorry, I'm walking away from the mic and it's getting bad. If you export from WhatsApp, the data is messy. It's very messy. So it's not clean. It's not designed for research outputs. Also, there's a lack of aesthetic customizability as well. We can't change how it looks. And that's quite a big deal when you're working with an organisation like the IFRC, whose logo is literally protected by the Geneva Convention on Human Rights. So there were some reservations, but despite that, we came up with some ideas, we came up with a design, and we proposed it. This is what we want to do, we said. This is what we want to do. WhatFutures. So WhatFutures is a 10-day game event, so it's a short thing. And we want young people to play it in small teams of 4 to 8. And we want those teams to respond to creative challenges that are set within WhatsApp groups. So we spoke to the IFRC, and what they were particularly interested in were finding answers to 3 questions, really. What are the local issues that young people will be facing in 2030? What are the local opportunities that will be appearing in 2030? And also, how should the IFRC change in order to meet those issues and opportunities? And with that, we came up with 3 creative challenges that we would set during this game. The first one, produce a news story from 2030 about the biggest challenge facing your society. The second one would be to create an advertisement for an innovation. And the third one would be record an audio or video report to the Secretary-General of the IFRC about an innovative response to a disaster. So we're covering all those bases there. But the issue of complexity, you can't just ask that question out of the blue. So when players signed up in a team, we asked them to choose a role, and these are the 4 roles that we chose: a technologist, environmental scientist, a political advisor, and cultural expert, thinking that these would broadly be able to, the 4 different ways of breaking down these large global issues. But of course, let's say you're the technologist, and there you are in your WhatsApp group, and you've just been asked to write a news story about 2030 in your society. How do you do that from a technological perspective when you're a 17-year-old on WhatsApp in Kenya? Maybe you don't know what it's like to be a technologist. Well, lucky for you, we put you in another WhatsApp group that's full of all the other technologists from the other teams. So you've got this kind of community of practice there. You've got other like-minded peers as well who are also trying to learn. And we push specific technologist information into that conference group. And the other people in your team as well. They've also got their own separate large-scale WhatsApp group where you can discuss specific issues, talk about them, bring them back to your team, and then synthesize them and then hopefully produce something that's rich and complex. Helping us with this, we had future guides. So future guides are what we call basically administrators. So these were super motivated IFRC volunteers who were responsible for maybe 10 or 15 teams each. So they would actually be in each of the teams. And they would be responsible for pushing out the information, but also gathering up information, answering any questions, and generally leaving a helping hand. And so what you ended up with was this kind of like pyramid scheme structure with me at the top, future guides distributed out into all these teams. All of these are WhatsApp groups, so all the teams there, and then the conferences there as well. This kind of like pushing information down through the pyramid, people synthesizing it, and then we'd extract sort of like this rich qualitative data. But of course, we didn't want it to be just a black hole, just a one-way thing. So we came up with this idea of broadcasting these leaderboards. At 3 points after each challenge, we would broadcast what we called these leaderboards, which were hand-picked, the best sort of like responses by the teams. We put them on a website, the IFRC website, and they could read these and they could comment on these, so people could see what all the other teams are doing as well, because obviously WhatsApp group's quite a closed thing, so we wanted to open it up as much as we could. So this is a core part of the feedback loop. So, luckily for us, the IFRC agreed to do it. They wanted to pilot the game originally in 5 countries. So we chose Kenya, Bulgaria, Australia, Finland, and Hong Kong. And they began player recruitment. So it's not 100% clear how these players were recruited, because as I said, that the IFRC is a deeply hierarchical organisation. But they essentially went onto a website and signed up in small teams. And we got 100 teams in total, which is great, from these 5 countries. So over the 10 days, we had, this is what the engagement flow looked like. You can see a very large peak of activity around that icebreaker team, sort of like chatty activity at the start there, and then a steady kind of like decline with like large peaks around the kind of the setting of the challenges. Those thin bars are the kind of the multimedia data that came out from each of the teams. And this kind of trend is generally pretty standard for any kind of large-scale participatory event. If anyone's done like an ARG or a large web-based kind of participation, this is kind of a pretty standard trend. We generated 95 multimedia artifacts in total, so that's audio, video, it's screenshots, it's written articles, all around these various challenges that we produced. And in total, we managed to get 16,100 WhatsApp messages as well. All of this, very rich qualitative data. So in that sense, we feel like it was quite successful. But of course, is the data that we got actually any good? Well, we looked at the multimedia data, and we decided to analyze it using Briggs' solo taxonomy. So this is a a taxonomy of the sophistication of an argument. On one side, you have pre-structural, which means I totally didn't understand what was going on. Then you have unistructural, which is expressing one point. Multi-structural, multiple points. Relational, multiple points related to each other. And then extended abstract, which is multiple points related to each other. And then the wider connotations spinning out from that. And we analyse each of these data to see. And as you can see, there's quite a large bulge around like multi-structural and relational as well. So we're quite happy that there was quite a lot of complex data there. We did automatic topic modelling of the message data as well and managed to identify a lot of key themes that came up that were kind of global across the 5 countries there, and also local issues as well that were specific to each of them. And that's still ongoing, the kind of the topic modelling of that data. And importantly, we spoke to the IFRC and they were very happy with this. They felt that not just the numbers, which they were quite pleased with, but also that it was the depth of engagement and the authenticity of engagement they were particularly excited about. So they were extremely happy with that. So much so that they asked us to actually do a global game as well. So in September 2017, we did the same thing but on a global scale, where we had, it's probably near 4,000 volunteers across 120 different countries, with 420 teams, and thousands and thousands and thousands of data, which I will get around to analysing at some point. My supervisor's in the audience, I'm making a promise there. But we wanted to still have more of an impact with the data that we got. So we produced a newspaper from the future. And this was to be printed out and distributed at the IFRC's annual General Assembly, and it was to be given to the head of every single national and regional branch in the IFRC. So that's every decision maker in the organisation. And this newspaper, every single thing that's in there, there's a little bit of an introduction, but all the articles in there were sourced directly from the game itself, with a kind of a summary there. So in this way, I should have said at the start as well, this is one of the cells of the whole engagement as well, was that you can directly have your voice pushed to the decision makers here. And this was if it wasn't given to them by hand, it was pushed under their door in the hotel as well. So that was a really exciting thing to be taken part of. So, So what does it all mean? What does it all mean? Well, looking back at our design goals, engagement, yeah. I mean, I think if you use popular communication platforms that people are already speaking on, you're gonna improve your engagement. And doing it in a creative, novel, and gameful way, that's also a good way of improving engagement. In terms of complexity, structuring groups in a way where people had those specific roles and those specific conferences, and allowing them to come together really helped break down these complex issues. And I think taking that structure and not only helps people understand complex issues, but also communicates an expectation as well that this is how deeply you should be thinking, which is cool. And then data as well. We actually managed to gather like workshop quality data, like the kind of stuff that you would normally get only out of like a focus group and sitting down with people, with quite a large distributed population, which is very exciting and added direct value to the Strategy 2030 process. And also, I think as well with the data, using already adopted communication apps brings to a higher level of authenticity as well. I mean, there's no intermediates there. The words are direct. But for me, going forward, I think probably the thing that I'm most excited about is thinking about these large-scale apps like WhatsApp and Facebook and all the social media and communication apps, thinking them instead of just as doing one thing, but thinking them more of as design material. So, like, if we think of them as design material, then what else can we build? WhatFutures is just one example that we did, but how could we reconfigure that in a different way? How could we play around with the dynamics of it? In the same way that like a carpenter looks at a piece of wood and decides, is this going to be good to make a table? What kind of things can I build with this? If we take that material view of these large apps, these large popular apps, then what other kind of things can we build with that as well? And I think that's a really exciting idea, and that's what I'm going to be taking forward. So in summary, you can get really authentic engagement. WhatFutures is just one example to do this with distributed populations around complex issues, and you can do this too. It's fast and easy and cheap. It's hard work though. And thinking about digital assistant apps as design material opens up lots of different compelling opportunities for engagements in the future. All right, thank you very much.
Amazing. amazing work. I really loved the amount of work, the amount of dissipation of it. I had one question because I think the idea that you created a newspaper or magazine, it's great. Any feedback from who read it? I mean, it went up, that's what we know, but how did they feel, or, I mean, even just a wow or something? Do you have something on that other end?
Yeah, I mean, the main feedback we got was if this is a newspaper from the future, why is it paper? But wow, people hadn't really heard their voices. And in fact, I mean, if I can talk quite candidly, the IFRC being such a large organisation, often all their branches have different ideas about how it should be run as well. And some of those weren't necessarily as happy having the voices of young people promoted as well. So there was a little bit of pushback. But as a way of putting young people in a place where they weren't seen before, people were quite happy.
I'm asking this question because what happens is when there are hierarchy like this, lots of negative comments are also there. I mean, most of the time it's frustration or all those feelings are there. So I was curious to know how did they receive it positively, or did they receive it at all?
I would say generally positively, but there was mixed.
Okay, Thank you.
Hello, Kai Lukov, University of Washington. Great talk.
Thank you.
I was curious on that note of negative comments that might have showed up in the groups. What were some instances of breakdown of this system that you created? I know you had the opportunity to analyze in depth a smaller scale deployment, and then you did a much larger scale deployment. But I imagine there was some iteration in between of what wasn't working, what needed to be revised.
Yeah. So the biggest breakdown was in communicative teams. So when a team was formed and one or two people decided not to take part, and it would strand a couple of people who wanted to participate but then didn't know how. So in the pilot game, we did this manually. We were sending out share invites to other groups. And for the large-scale study, we created more of a system where you could say to your future guide, my group's in communicative, can you move me to another one? And we had a whole extra day built in just to make sure that everybody was in a group that was active. So that's one example, yeah.
Hi, I'm Tesh from Jigsaw. Great talk. I had a couple of questions about the people who participated. So you talk about increasing engagement. I was wondering, do you have any numbers of how much the engagement increased with this? I'd imagine more, but do you have any numbers behind it?
I wish I had really nice compare and contrast, but
right.
In a way, because it's such a novel approach,
right.
I don't have anything similar to compare it to. I think in terms of raw numbers, it was probably similar to the questionnaires and surveys that I had used before, but in terms of depth of engagement, I think they were probably most impressed,
right.
But I'm afraid I don't have the raw numbers. There's more in the paper, though.
Gotcha. Another question, and sorry, I haven't read the paper. I was wondering, did the people who engaged with this were different in any way than the people who would engage with the survey?
Again, yes, but then that was reported for our interviews with the IFRC afterwards, was that they had a much higher levels of response in rural Kenya and urban Hong Kong, and in this pilot in particular, which they had ever had before. Yeah.
Any particular reasons why?
Well, they put it down to the use of WhatsApp. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
Did you get a chance to look at the conversational structure of the response in any way, sort of how the back and forth shaped? Because I think that could be a clue to some teams not doing well together and not being communicative.
Yeah, not yet. But like I said, there's so much there. And also, with it being a global game as well, it's a translation issue. So although we are accepting submissions in English primarily, in their individual teams, they would use whatever language they felt comfortable with. So we're still working on that.
So it sounded like you analyzed some of this using topic modeling at some point. Were there any topics that were surprising, that weren't related to things that maybe you had mentioned to them before that stood out on their own?
Actually, the thing that was most surprising was the inadequacy of topic modeling for dealing with emoji data. Going back to your talk earlier. I mean, particularly because we set activities that were specifically around expressing the hopes and fears of the future just around emojis. And so we felt that possibly that wasn't the best tactic for us to use for the analysis. I don't know if that goes some way towards helping that question.
Great. Let's thank our speaker.